Hello, BookTube. I have a little Thursday mail for you. It was a beautiful, beautiful day. Sunny and bright. Not too cold. Lovely. Just lovely. Spent the whole day reading with the bean. And intermittently looking at the weather. Because the weather is now starting to ramp up in alarm about a nor'easter that's going to be hitting the Boston area on the weekend, on Saturday. The weather forecasters are all saying it's definitely going to hit us. It's a big one. It's going to be a mess. They're saying that this is a remnant of a hurricane, that it's going to cause massive amounts of rain all day long. And the forecasters are all saying it's just lucky that it's coming to us in such a pressure range and at such a time and at such a speed so that it's not snow. That if things were off by just a little bit, this would be a massive snowstorm at the end of October. And they're comparing it to there was a big storm that we had a couple of years ago that happened in October, and they're comparing it to that and telling everybody what to expect for Saturday. And listening to those forecasts over the course of the day, I started to develop a very strong impression that it is not going to rain a single drop in Boston on Saturday. That this storm, which you can see on radar, and which is 3 states wide, and which would require the equivalent energy output of several thousand Hiroshima bombs to annihilate completely from the atmosphere of Earth, is nevertheless going to disappear. And it's not going to go anywhere else. It's just going to disappear. It's going to be mislaid, and we're going to have dry skies all day Saturday now. We'll check and see. But I have seen that happen so many times, and it usually is foreshadowed by meteorologists agreeing. So we shall see. So Saturday's mail might be soggy. But for today, it was a beautiful day. And we've got a stack of packages here. The 2 that we'll end with are enormous. Satisfyingly plump things. No boxes, but these things do go up in size. So we'll see. We'll see what we have here. Ian, are you up for a little? He's just laying next to my leg. She's perfectly willing to have me hand the package down to her, but she doesn't want to get up. We've had a very good day. Oh, great. Okay. I requested this. This is on a subject that in 2018 has been fascinating me no end, and that is machine intelligence, algorithms, AI. And this is by Olaf Groth and Mark Nitzberg, and it is called Solomon's Code, Humanity in a World of Thinking Machines. Let's see here. With the recent backlash against Facebook, election interference, fake news algorithms, or headlines about Cambridge Analytica and Russian bots, Solomon's Code could not be more presciently timed than if its authors were plugged to a vast data troves themselves. Whether it is medicine, money, or love, technologies powered by forms of artificial intelligence are playing an increasingly prominent role in our lives, the so-called Internet of Things, where your Fitbit and your microwave and your smart house and your car are all powered now by primitive AIs, which can link and which can be hacked and which can be modified and which are gathering more information than they were programmed to gather. These primitive AIs are almost always found to be gathering more information than they were programmed to gather and doing more with it. They connect more dots than they are programmed to connect. That ought to frighten people. That ought to absolutely terrify you. But anyway, new AI technologies can drive cars, treat damaged brains, and nudge workers to be more productive. But they also can threaten, manipulate, and alienate us from others. They can pit nation against nation. But they also can help the global economy tackle some of its greatest challenges, from food crises to global climate change. And this book is all about that. It is all about that by 2 specialists, right? These 2 are specialists. Olaf Groth is a professor of strategy, innovation, and economics at Hult International Business School. And he was the founder and CEO of Cambrian AI. So he is deeply involved in AI. And Mark Nitzberg serves as executive director of the Center for Human Compatible Artificial Intelligence at Berkeley. And as principal at Cambrian AI, same company that Olaf Groth founded. He studied AI at MIT and completed his PhD at Harvard University. So they certainly have the research chops. We'll see if they can write a good book. But I'm all for it. Did I mention when this comes out? I think this is out real soon. It might be an October book. No, early November. We are slowly but surely moving into early November releases. Thank God. Thank God. Although I still have so much October work to do that it's going to spill over into November. It's never a good feeling. But there's no way to avoid it. The sheer number of books that came out in October. So what have we got here? You want to get up, baby? No? Well, if she doesn't get up, then I'll show her to you when we're all done. Oh my. Okay. All right, this comes out in January. This is by Alan Demerger, and it is The Persecution of the Knights Templar. Very pretty thing. And this is from Pegasus Books. They're great people. They come out with a steady line of great history. Let's see here. The trial of the Knights Templar is one of the most infamous in history. Accused of heresy by King Philip IV of France, in 1307, the Templars were arrested and imprisoned, had their goods seized, and their monasteries ransacked. Under brutal interrogation and torture, they made shocking confessions, denial of Christ, desecration of the cross, ritual sex acts, and more. This narrative follows the everyday reality of the trial from the early days of scandal and scheming in 1305, via torture, imprisonment, and the dissolution of the order, to 1314, when leaders Jacques de la Motte and Geoffrey de Carnay were burned at the stake. So this is all about the downfall of the Templars. This comes out in January. I think I've mentioned on this channel before that the Knights Templar is one of those little pockets of history that has never managed to interest me. I read about them, of course, because there are new books all the time. There are new books in every season, so I do read about them. I know a fair amount about them, but there's not that spark of ooh, I can't wait. And I keep waiting. I keep waiting to see if some new book will do that, will cause that. Maybe this will be the one. I will certainly read it, and then we'll see. All right, let's see. A satisfyingly non-fiction start to things. What's that bit? She's just sitting here. I don't know if you can see. No, you can't see. Let me see. She's just sitting there. She refuses to sit up. She's perfectly happy to take the package, but she's not her usual bouncy self. That's very strange. All right, so let's see. Oh, all right. We're done with nonfiction, but I requested this because it sounds fantastic. This is, I think, a debut. Yes, this is a debut. It's by John McMahon, and it's called The Good Detective. And the tagline on the cover, right up top there, is a killer. It is, how do you solve a crime if you killed the prime suspect? So this comes out in hardcover in March. Let's see. In Mason Falls, Georgia, police detective P.T. Marsh is a wounded man, beaten down by the death of his loving wife and son. Now this good detective is a cop on the edge, making sloppy mistakes when he should know better, such as when he agrees to help a woman out by confronting her abusive boyfriend. When the next morning he gets called to the scene of his newest murder case, he is stunned to arrive at the house of the very man he beat up the night before. He could swear the guy was alive when he left, but can he be sure? What's certain is that his fingerprints are all over the crime scene. Marsh knows that he was one of the last people to see this man alive, but he can't reveal his involvement. Then things get even worse for him. He and his younger partner, Remy Morgan, have another murder to investigate. This time, the dead body of a black teenager found in a burned-out field with a portion of a blackened rope around his neck. And the dead man he roughed up is the prime suspect. Amid rising racial tension and media scrutiny, P.T. uncovers something sinister at the heart of the boy's murder, a conspiracy leading all the way back to the time of the Civil War. Risking everything to unravel the puzzle even as he fights for his own personal demons, P.T. races headlong toward an incendiary and life-altering showdown. And that struck me as really fun stuff. I mean, active Dragons and Elves fantasy, right? In the way that police procedural thrillers so often are. That is active Dragons and Elves fantasy. Even from that basic plot description, none of those elements would happen. None of them would. Even in a small town in Georgia, nothing. The story wouldn't continue. But I'm okay with that. I'm okay. Police procedurals often have to do that sort of thing, and you just wink at it because you know that the intent of the narrative is elsewhere. The intent of the narrative is to thrill you, and I think that's fantastic. I think the plot description makes some of the book probably predictable, I'd be willing to bet, for instance, that the death of his wife and child is not a cold case. I'd be willing to bet that it ends up being connected to the stuff that he's investigating, either in this book or in some future book. And of course, when you hear that plot description that he beats up an abusive boyfriend the night before, and then the next morning that same person is found dead, in the real world, the obvious explanation would be that the beating caused internal bleeding, and that the man died as a result of that, and that the good detective is in fact guilty of murder. But you know that instead it's going to be that somebody slipped in and did something in order to frame this guy, one way or another. It sounds thrilling. I will report back in the new year. Let's see here. Oh, didn't even move for that one. The bean does not want to move. Oh, okay, great. All right, this comes out in early November. This is the finished copy by Paul Hannebrink of A Spectre Haunting Europe. This is the myth of Judeo-Bolshevism, which was the bugaboo that motivated all the tyrannies of Europe in the beginning of the 20th century. Let's see here. This is the first comprehensive account of the evolution and exploitation of the Judeo-Bolshevik myth from its origin to the present day. For much of the 20th century, Europe was haunted by the threat of its own imagining, Judeo-Bolshevism. This myth, that communism was a Jewish plot to destroy the nations of Europe, was a paranoid fantasy, and yet fears of a Jewish Bolshevik conspiracy took hold during the Russian Revolution and spread across Europe. During World War II, these fears sparked genocide. And this history begins with the counter-revolutionary movements that roiled Europe at the end of World War I. After the Holocaust, the specter of Judeo-Bolshevism did not die. Instead, it adapted to and became a part of the Cold War world. Transformed yet again, it persists today on both sides of the Atlantic in the toxic politics of revitalized right-wing nationalism. Of course, that pub sheet was written before the President of the United States said openly on camera that he considers himself a nationalist. And then elaborated in impossible naivete by saying that, as far as he's concerned, that term means he loves his country. Anyway, I'm hoping that this book deals very little with the present day. There's a huge amount of material about this delusion that its motivation for Nazi Germany alone is a whole book. And that book has been written, so I'm not sure what that pub sheet means about this being the first comprehensive history. Maybe it's going to first in terms of ranging far and wide. We shall see. Either way, it's coming right up, and I have the advanced copy, and I haven't touched it, so I will get to it. Let's see what this next one is. Oh, okay. Oh boy, these are all November reminders. I guarantee this is a November book. Yes, okay, these are all the first week of November, so I'm being subtly nudged to turn my attention to November, but I can't. There's still a massive amount of October that I have to deal with, that I haven't dealt with yet. But we've seen this before. This is by Aaron Sheehan Dean. This is the finished copy of The Calculus of Violence, about the American Civil War, as you can almost make out from the incredibly blurry, faded, sepia-tone period photograph that is the cover. You can sort of make out an image behind, a gray, fuzzy image right behind the gray, fuzzy words of the title. Let's see here. We saw this before. Shiloh, Chancellorsville, Gettysburg. Tens of thousands of soldiers died on these iconic Civil War battlefields, and throughout the South, civilians suffered terrible cruelty. At least 750,000 lives were lost during the American Civil War. Given its seemingly indiscriminate mass destruction, this conflict is often thought of as the first total war. But the author of this book argues for another interpretation. The Calculus of Violence demonstrates that this notoriously bloody war could have been much worse. Military forces on both sides sought to contain casualties inflicted on soldiers and civilians. In Congress, in church pews, and in letters home, Americans debated the conditions under which lethal violence was legitimate, and their arguments differentiated carefully among victims, women and men, black and white, enslaved and free. So I think I remember saying when I got the advanced copy of this that I will probably be arguing with this author quite a bit, because I don't think you can make a strong case that there was not complete intentionality with a lot of the violence campaigns of the American Civil War. And it sounds like in order for this book to work at all, it's going to have to say that some of that violence was not intentional, and that a lot of it was curtailed intentionally. We'll see. That's my favorite kind of aspect of nonfiction books on subjects that I know well, is that kind of fruitful arguing with the author. I don't argue with them from a closed mind. Instead, I argue with them from a series of positions that I have achieved through reading and thinking. And if they're going to change those positions, then they're going to have to meet with some resistance. And we shall see. We shall see. I let it go way too long. I really need to get to it. Then we're now at these last two. They're very heavy. They're probably finished copies. Let's see what this first one is. Well, I hand her Nibs the material because she doesn't want to jump for it. I will pick her up and show her to you. Okay. All right. Okay. This is a November book. This is a huge November book. Okay. All right. This is November, yes. Early November, first week of November. This is Andrew Roberts' big new book on Winston Churchill, Walking with Destiny. Another 1,000-page history from him, with the faded sepia tone picture on the cover. This was his book. This is his follow-up to his gigantic Napoleon biography from a couple of years ago. That was a New York Times bestseller, and that was on book clubs everywhere, despite how big it was. And it made for great reading, even though it was completely frustrating. It wasn't Andrew Roberts lapsing unknowingly into unstinting hero worship of Napoleon Bonaparte. Instead, it was Andrew Roberts engaging gleefully and knowingly in hero worship of Napoleon Bonaparte. So the UK title was Napoleon the Great, and you had to make your peace with that. I can't stand Napoleon Bonaparte. I think he did nothing good in his entire life, in his entire career. And instead of anything like a balanced account, Roberts' book on him was entirely the opposite of that. It was that he did almost nothing wrong in his entire life, his entire career. And it was great. It is such good reading. It is so fantastically fun. And I'm here to tell you, this book is too. I am no big fan of Winston Churchill either. I think you can probe his life or his career almost anywhere and find a lying, mendacious sot and a glory hound. Someone who is remembered and is given 1,000-page biographies very much through his own design, which I'm just Catholic enough to think is really seedy. But the one thing you know about, regardless of the stance, regardless of the subject matter, the one thing you know about this author is that you're going to keep reading. He is such a fantastic writer, and that's what this is. Let's see here. This is a landmark reconsideration of the iconic war leader based on extensive new material, from private letters and diaries to transcripts of war cabinet meetings. There's nothing like that in here. There's not a single scrap of anything in this book that is new. But that doesn't matter. That is the standard gimmick now for biographers and their publishers to put in pub sheets and to say in interviews or whatnot. I don't know why. I really don't know why. None of us, neither you nor I, have written as many biographies as Andrew Roberts has. He's been working in archives and writing great history for his whole professional career. Why isn't that enough to justify a 1,000-page biography of Winston Churchill? Why do you have to say it's based on new material? Anyway, when we seek an example of unalloyed courage, the man who comes to mind is Winston Churchill. The visionary leader, immune from the consensus of the day, who stood firmly for his beliefs when everyone doubted him. But how did young Winston become Churchill? What gave him the strength to take on the superior force of Nazi Germany when bombs rained on London and so many others had caved? In his previous book, The Storm of War, Roberts gave us a tantalizing glimpse of Churchill, the war leader. Now we have the full-length biography. And that's true. Churchill is a fantastic character in Storm of War. Storm of War is a fantastic book. Just an amazing one-volume history of World War II. But now we have, just in time for the book-giving holiday, now we have this enormous Churchill biography. And I've already read it. I will be poring over this, the finished copy in minute detail with a pencil, taking all sorts of notes, turning down all sorts of pages. This is the volume I will be studying, and I'll be studying it soon, this weekend. I'm going to write a review of this for, I believe it's the Christian Science Monitor. So I'm going to be in the scrim. I'm going to be in the mix of voices for this, but it's going to get reviewed everywhere. And I've already read it. I can tell you it's fantastic. If you buy it and read it, or if you borrow it from the library or whatever, you're going to love it. If you have a potential recipient, some relative who's a World War II buff or a Churchill fan, God help us, this is hands down the book to get. It's just, of the season, it's the book to get. It's just amazing. I'm going to see how much arguing I can get done with this thing in what I think for the monitor. If it's the monitor, I will only have about 800 words. That's not a lot of room. So we'll see what kind of arguing I can do. It'll be fun. It'll be a fun review. I met that same frustration with Anthony Beevor's new book about the Battle of Arnhem. There were some very detailed points about that book that I wanted to disagree with him on in a review, and I couldn't do it. I didn't have the room to do anything more than vaguely hint that not all of these conclusions are incontestable, or some vieweries like that. To put it mildly, I have many such things about this book. So I won't be able to work them into a review, but I'm sure there will be a venue along the way. Like, for instance, the thing that I was mentioning the other day, I would like to do an ebook in 2019. I would like to do an ebook called The Year in Reviews, which is a collection of all of my book reviews from 2018 with elaborations. So in the case of, for instance, where I'm reprinting, so to speak, in this ebook, a review of a novel that I read in January. In January, February of 2019, when I'm going to put it in the book, I might elaborate on how the novel has grown on me, or how I've thought about it a lot, or the lasting impressions, stuff like that you don't usually get in a book review. You can't get them in a book review. And the same thing, I would do the same thing with stuff like the Beaver Arnhem book, or this thing, where I would reprint my review. I would tell you where it appeared and when it appeared, and then I might do an addendum, just expanding on it. And it would be all that. The whole book would be that. It would be The Year in Reviews, 2018, as an ebook. The whole 9 yards, the whole process where we go from assembling all of the material, adding all of the new material, adding an introduction, assembling it as a book, and then publishing it so that you can buy it for $1, like you were at the Brattle. One way or another, that would be the perfect opportunity to do that. I'm not going to get a chance to do that in an 800-word review, but I heartily recommend the book. And then the last one here, we've got the last one. Another big fat package here. Could be a finished copy. Let's see. Oh no, it's multiple books. Okay. What have we got here? Oh, it's more romances. Okay. Well, I have a second copy of Snowfall on Lighthouse Lane. I've already not only read this, but talked to you about it. It was really good. It's a wonderful small town novel, and here it is. Here's another example. That's great. And then we have a Christmas romance. This is by Rayanne Thane. It is Season of Wonder, a Haven Point novel. I've never read any Haven Point novels, but I bet it will be the similar thing to Honeymoon Harbor. I bet it will be that it will rely a lot for its narrative heft on the lower key rhythms of small town living, of locals, of the things, the normal quotidian details of these people's lives. We shall see. Very pretty book, though. Just a wonderful finished trade paperback. And then Robin Carr, a Sullivan's Crossing novel. So yet another location novel. This is The Best of Us, with beach chairs, multicolored beach chairs. So what is this? In Sullivan's Crossing, Robin Carr has created a place where good people, powerful emotions, great humor, and a healthy dose of common sense are the key ingredients to happy life. Very similar to the Joanne Ross. That's exactly how I would describe the main gist of that book. Sullivan's Crossing brings out the best in people. It's a place you'll want to visit again and again. Like I said, when I was talking about Snowfall on Lighthouse Lane, that was the main feeling that I had of attraction to the book, was wanting to be in this location. Dr. Lee Culver loves practicing medicine in Timberlake, Colorado. It is a much-needed change of pace from her stressful life in Chicago. The only drawback is she misses her Aunt Helen, the woman who raised her. But it's time that Lee has her independence, and she hopes the beauty of the Colorado wilderness will entice her aunt to visit often. Helen Culver is an independent woman who lovingly raised her sister's orphan child. Now, with Lee grown, it's time for her to live her life herself. The retired teacher has become a successful mystery writer who loves to travel and intends never to experience winter again. When Helen visits Lee, she is surprised to find her niece still needs her, especially when it comes to sorting out her love life. But the biggest surprise comes when Lee takes Helen out to Sullivan's Crossing, and Helen finds herself falling for the place and one special person. Helen and Lee will have each other to decide if they can open themselves to love, and neither expected to find and seize the opportunity to live their best lives. That sounds fascinating. It sounds like the mother is going to be the one who falls in love. Well, that would be amazing if that were true. So this comes out in January. I'm going to have to wait, but I'll talk about it again. We will certainly encounter it again. So this whole thing ends with three romances. All right, so we'll do a Steve pile here, and for just logistical reasons, we have to put Churchill at the bottom because this is 1,000 pages. This is Winston Churchill, Walking with Destiny. I know the description made it sound like the most syrupy hero worship imaginable, and it mostly is, but it doesn't matter because there's not a single boring page in this book, which is an accomplishment on its own. So you can hold your nose and read, same as I did. And a lot of you probably don't hate Churchill the way I do. So then we have The Calculus of Violence, about the way that killing was viewed in the American Civil War, including by the people who were tasked with doing it. Then A Spectre Haunting Europe, the persistent delusion of Judeo-Bolshevism, which does indeed exist today. It does indeed motivate political groups today. Then The Good Detective, a debut. Then we have, what have we got here? Oh yes, The Persecution of the Knights Templar, which could be, you never know, it could be the Knights Templar book that does it for me. then Solomon's Code, all about AIs and the Internet of Things, smart technology and its future. And then three romances. We have The Best of Us, which is, we've got three locations here. This one is a Sullivan's Crossing novel. Then we have Season of Wonder, which is a Haven Point novel. And then we have our old friend, Snowfall on Lighthouse Lane, which is a Honeymoon Harbor novel. So, once again, quite a bit of variety. That's just the way I like it. So that is our Thursday mail haul. So I'll wrap this up and we'll reconvene. Thank you, BookTube. Oh wait, you have to see Frida, don't you? They want to see you. Come here. You're loving. Populous wants to see you. There you go. Oh, what are they all doing? Who are all those people? Oh, shouldn't feel like destroying stuff on camera, but you know how it is with temperamental starlets. Anyway, I'll wrap this up, but I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.